Bonjour à tous. Welcome to the Nouvel Esprit Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Guillermo Moreno.
Jeremy Hossotter.
Charles Masiari.
Awesome. And today we are going to talk about another hot button issue just because of, understandably, how critical we are of the culture that we're at today. Of course, when it comes to moral issues, topics based on morality, I think people are we're more opinionated, or we're just more vocal about our views. Now there's some things that are very, I wouldn't even say trendy anymore. Now they're just cultural and we're rightly critical of them. And in my perspective, they're just not necessarily a bad thing. And I say I really mean just one main thing. It's social media. um I'm convinced that it's not a bad thing. It's an instrument, it's a tool, it's a piece of technology, which is a good in and of itself. But we hear criticisms of social media, and something that comes to my mind, I don't remember where I heard this from. It might have been in a conversation or in a podcast, but briefly, we are in the, we're amidst, not amidst, the generations of today. um of course they vary culturally. Now my generation, so our generation, like us, Jeremy and Charles, we remember what it was like before smart devices. And just our the generations after us, they don't they don't know what it's like to not have smart devices. And that, just for a lack of other words, juxtaposition startled me. What do you mean you don't know what it's like? Because I can't imagine my childhood any other way. And for better or worse, kids nowadays don't see their childhood as apart from smart devices, and I fail to see how that's a good thing in and of itself. Something that prompted this topic all the more, a few days ago, this is just a bit of my testimony. A few days ago, I mean, I have a lot on my plate, just personally speaking. I am on summer vacation, but I was caught in between just so much that I could work on. I simultaneously, paradoxically, wanted to do all of it and none of it all at once because I couldn't figure out what to do. As we say in Spanish, no hallo que hacer, no hallaba que hacer. Just being stuck with things that need to get done. Now, I know, just real quick, wondering what I need to get done. Certainly, just working on articles for our website, working on research for the articles on our website, which includes a lot of reading. But then there's all these things that I had to do versus each other amongst themselves, versus things that I want to do. Well, look, here's this movie that I rented. Yeah, I still rent movies, by the way, and that I've been meaning to watch that I haven't been able to see yet because I keep putting it off, because things need to get done, because there's so many of them, because there's so little time, because this, and that. There's this stress that I was undergoing a few days ago. And something that I would compare it with the desolation and an emptiness that comes with, um it's not depression per se, but it certainly can lead to depression. This lack of, there's this lack, and I think we've touched on this before, this yearning for fulfillment. And I was having a major case of this desolation and emptiness and stress just a few days ago. So what do I do? What do I do? I turn to uh, these smart devices. I turn specifically to YouTube. So what do I do when there's all these things that I should be doing? I turn to this other thing, and I watch Dave Rubin. I watch one of his videos, and he shows a clip of Kamala Harris, and she laughs at the end of her interview, and after she answers her question, and then Rubin points out her cackle. And then I started laughing. I started laughing. And um, there was that momentary, um, just for lack of other words, pleasure that, that feels better. Like, oh, I don't physiologically and mentally feel as bad anymore. And I'll just say it, that turning to social media and getting that temporary um, pleasure, it felt like taking a hit. Not that I've ever done drugs, but coffee technically is a drug. And it sure, any of us who drink coffee, like we know what it's like to take that sip, and it wakes us up. It gives us that physiological response that we quote unquote need. And that turning to social media, turning to smart devices, that it felt like taking a hit, that was a red flag for me. Something to like just tells me this is not normal to have to turn to something else for this momentary relief. I think that's a better word I was looking for. This momentary relief instead of turning to something more substantial, like prayer. I've done it before. I when just feeling this kind of desolation, emptiness, and stress, I pulled out my rosary and I've prayed, and it helped better than anything ever could. Or I could go to anyone in my household and just chill with them, just be personally with them, even if it's challenging. Or I could have called any of my friends. I could have done anything else, but I did not. And that's something that, in passing, we've heard criticisms of, and rightly so, rightly so. Before we proceed, I would like to recommend our audience to read Jeremy's article called "You're Not Worth Talking to." It's in fact, before we proceed, or as we proceed, Jeremy, can you share with us a little bit about what your article is about? And please give us spoiler alerts.
Okay. Yeah. So here I am on an airplane flying to Washington, D.C. And here I am in Washington, D.C., watching a bunch of my students interact on buses, in a hotel room, or I'm just in line at Starbucks. And yep, and there's just kind of, you just see screens everywhere. That's the norm. So on the subway, on the bus, whatever, people are staring at screens. And I guess the moment for me was when I was actually at Mount Vernon touring George Washington's house. A group of us were talking with a reenactment actor of someone from George Washington's time. And he made this very interesting point about fashion, because if you went outside in the 1700s without a hat on, you're considered essentially naked or undressed, because the hat was part of what you wore. And so the point was this: if you don't dress up nicely, you're effectively telling people that you're not worth, that they are not worth you being dressed up for. So you dressing up was a way of essentially respecting other people and affirming their dignity implicitly by saying, yes, you are worthy for me to dress up to look nice for you. And with all those kind of reflections, I had my own insight where if we're looking at a screen, you're essentially telling the other person that the screen is more important. And if you are in a social environment with other people and you're choosing to look at the screen, you're essentially saying implicitly that the other person or group of people are not worth talking to. What you're doing on your screen is more valuable towards yourself. You believe it's more valuable than whatever your social interaction is. And so the screen, in a way, becomes your relationship. It becomes your friend. You take it everywhere with you. You we take our phones to the bathroom. We take our phones on our car rides, in our beds. We're everywhere. It's a handheld device that you can take anywhere you go. And so the phone becomes your constant companion. If you have a question, you can just ask your phone. How do I make this? How do I make that? How do I get to Target or whatever? You can just ask your phone, and it's right there. You don't have this conversation anymore with people. Some of that is a good thing, but you lose something. You lose something of the social interaction. Or when you go to Starbucks or a coffee shop and you're just there doing your thing, well, everyone else is doing their thing too. Everyone's looking at their phones, listening to their music. No one's talking to each other. Everyone is isolated monads. And when you have, it's a very individualistic view that you're accepting. And it's not like you're intellectually accepting it, it's just how you're living. So it's not necessarily a conscious choice that I'm going to be individualistic by looking at my phone. You're just doing it. It's kind
Holy
of like
smokes.
it's kind
I'm
of
sorry.
like you go to the park, you see people exercising. What are they doing? They're listening to music on their headphones. You have parents, they're watching their kids at the park, except their eyes are glued on their phone. Why aren't they spending that time with their kids? You name it, it's all about the screen. And when you said, Guillermo, that it's a hit, you are correct because screens and social media release dopamine. And that's precisely what makes a drug, is that release of dopamine. It's what makes cocaine addictive. It's what makes marijuana addictive, that release of dopamine.
Holy smokes. So if you finish your thought, then great, because I do want to just build off of everything that you've just shared. Did you finish your thought?
Oh yeah, continue building, Guillermo.
Oh, sweet. No,
I got some more things to say, but I wanted to wait.
you know, let's proceed real quick with our own experiences in social media. The reason why I think it's important is because, and later I want to segue into why, just paradoxically, I think, well, we're doing it. First of all, we have a couple of social media pages, but podcasting and in and of itself, well, does that not count as social media? And well, it would seem like some kind of disservice or limiting of ourselves if we weren't in social media to begin with. And something that I forgot to mention is the title of today's episode: social media. Is it worth it? Um, as we proceed, yeah, I just real quick, I was introduced to social media when I was in a junior in high school, I believe. Um, and because there was this thing called MySpace, and it was getting bigger and bigger, and my friends convinced me to make an account, and I did, just because on my own initiative. I would not have. Somebody else said, "Oh, this is fun. Look, this is um yeah, you're missing out, basically." In a manner of speaking, they didn't say that word for word, but just once MySpace started, then I got introduced to Facebook later on. And I'm not gonna lie, there was a pleasure aspect of it, just seeing it. It's like trying to not trying to communicate, but trying to be social because we are social beings. And here's this thing that kind of looks like it's bridging a gap. I think, especially for introverts, though I could be wrong, that, oh, yeah, we're all yearning for a community and for a healthy social lifestyle. And this seemed to be making up for at least what I was lacking. And I think for what overwhelmingly either many of us are lacking or we wish we had more of.
Yeah. If you think about it, Guillermo, right? Man is a social being, so
Mm-hmm.
it's part of our nature to be social.
Mm.
And so when you talk about that lack, it's something we feel within our being because of who we are as social creatures. We have to have that for our flourishing, and we sense that implicitly. And social media, in a sense, preys upon that feeling.
Interesting.
I mean, sure, it's a good thing you got 2,000 friends on Facebook, but are they really your friends? Do you really talk to them? I
No,
mean,
it,
my
uh,
on my Facebook, there's only like two people I talk to.
besides me,
Let's see here. Charles, are you on my Facebook?
I don't believe so.
I think so. I don't know.
Okay. So maybe
But
maybe
I
it's
do
only
talk to
three
you
or
in real life,
four.
so
Yeah. We don't talk on Facebook either.
right.
Yeah, there's only like two people I talk to on Facebook, maybe. Yeah.
Which brings me to the other point that I would like for each of us to make. Yes, how did we get into social media? What our experiences are in social media, and how active are we in it? In actuality, I know I kind of just check it thoroughly once a day, my Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, like in the morning or at night. And then I'll distract myself with it a number of times throughout the day, but nothing substantial. I just look and put it away. Um, and like you, Jeremy, I don't really talk to anyone. In fact, back in the day, yeah, I would. It had more practical uses where I would talk to, and even then, only about half a dozen people out of the hundreds. And just one thing that I just have to admit, one practical thing about it is just being able to not necessarily stay in touch. Well, yes, stay in touch with people who I just don't speak to anymore because we went our separate ways. Now I know, oh, so and so got married, so and so had kids. Oh, look, their kids are growing up. And being able to have social media to keep up with one another, at least in those respects, that's nice. No, I'm not gonna lie, that's nice.
It's nice, sure. But here's a flip side, Guillermo. You also get this situation where you're like, oh my gosh, what happened to this person? They became a drug addict,
Mm.
or they decide to get a sex change operation,
Oh boy.
or what's actually sinister, because what you described and I described, that's just life, people have blessings and some people do stupid things. And that's just part of life. Tragedies happen as much as joys. But when we think about it in this manner, for a lot of people, when they go on social media like Facebook and they're scrolling through and they see, oh man, this person looks successful, or wow, why does she get that cute guy and not me?
Sure. Sure.
Now you have a problem because you start measuring yourself in terms of other people and their successes, and that becomes a source for becoming depressed or anxious. And when it comes to teenagers, it's
Oh
something
boy.
like 30% of teenagers who use excessive amount of social media are depressed, have depression. There is a strong correlation between the more you use social media and the more likely you will be a depressed, sad individual. It's because social media makes you a sad, depressed individual because of what it does to you. Because you compare yourself with others and their successes, and you see that. And so you start measuring yourself by how little you are successful in comparison to them. And you have the release of the dopamine. So more and more and more, you consume it more and more. What social media does to your brain is it literally alters your brain chemistry because it's releasing dopamine and it becomes an addiction the more you feed it.
I mean, those are disturbing facts. They really are.
You you have to ask yourself this question. Why is it for teenagers suicide is like the second highest cause of
Oh,
death?
that's disturbing.
Why is that? There are many reasons. I think a major component of that is social media. That's going to require more research to verify, but I suspect a lot of it is just what social media does to people.
And this tyranny of the screens, it's obviously not happening, not happy, not helping. But Jeremy, how did you, what was your experience with social media when you first began up until what it's like now?
So I've been very negative so far in this video or our podcast episode, I should say. So let
Not
me,
negative enough, Jeremy.
not negative enough.
I don't think so. Yeah, I think so too.
So I have a hatred for social media, even though we're on it, we're using it. Because as you said at the beginning of this episode, it is a tool that you can use for good or evil. Pandora's box has been open. It's time to use it for good. Though I will tell our readers, our listeners, everywhere I go, limit your social media time, limit your screen use time, spend more time walking, smelling the flowers, playing with your children, or hanging out with friends, talking to someone. With that said, I began social media back in high school. First thing I first social media website was Facebook. I got into gaming. When I got into gaming, I also got into online communities. In college, my cousin and I, our favorite gaming community for a game died. They, the server or owners for the entire game completely banned the community because the leader of the community did some unsavory things. And so the gaming community that we really enjoyed was shut down effectively. And so we got into a new game and we wanted to make our own community to kind of have a place where we could hang out with some friends and have fun, playing games together. And that led to us getting into the beta for a game called PlanetSide 2. We started a gaming community, and that community just grew. It started with just my cousin and me, and it became a group that has over 1,000 members. And in my many years running this gaming community, I have witnessed horrible things to people. Um, those of you that will be looking at our theology of body video series, we can certainly say there were many men of concupiscence. Whether they're trying to send pictures of genitalia to female members or other things. I got to witness a couple break up and go into divorce. I also got to witness another couple meet each other through the game and the gaming community, and they got married. And as far as I know, they're still happily ever after to this day. I also know that given the problems with social media, there are many broken, hurt people. And so they seek online communities to help navigate that hurt. And so there was one individual who his entire high school career, he was bullied, picked on, and he's a bright kid. And what saved him from committing suicide was this gaming community and playing games with a bunch of friends online. And he was not the only one. There, the a community through social media, like this video game and having a server for people to talk to on Discord, really has helped a lot of people deal with mental problems, with depression, with suicide problems, self-harm. And the people they're talking to, they're just average people, nerds, gamers. But just having that community of support has been transformative for many people's lives. So while I am going to be very negative, there is also a positive aspect, such as this gaming community. There are a lot of gaming communities where people are terrible human beings because they are promoting things like Nazism, anti-Semitism, you name it. Plus, you have the problems of pornography and masturbation being common memes that people joke about and indulge in. There's a lot of brokenness, but you can build a community where people can come together and heal a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. And you mentioned something that I never thought of before, gaming communities.
Yeah,
Uh, Um, so that, of course, clearly counts as social media. And jumping ahead a little bit, um, dating websites, right?
yeah, yeah.
That counts
Dating
as social media.
websites.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting one because you think about a dating website, it's in some respects, it's very similar to buying a car or, you just window shopping on Amazon or something. You're looking at books or whatever. You see, oh, here's a title, here's a picture, here's a description. There is a very serious threat where you objectify the other person and just you treat them as an object of consumption, right? You're the consumer, this is the product. The product is a romantic partner. And that very much goes hand in hand with kind of our ethos as a culture, that utilitarian make use of the other person for my own sexual gratification or my own emotional needs or whatever. On the flip side, I met my wife through social media, through a dating website. So it is something that is a tool that can be used in the right way where you can find true love and happily ever after. But the problem comes back to the human heart. You have to keep in mind that we don't live in a Christian society. And so you have to be a apostle where you are trying to bring people back to the heart, back to their conscience, to live authentically human. And how some social media websites and companies design their business model are against man's true fulfilling. Perfect example is Pornhub. You can already guess what it is. It's YouTube, but all porn. Such a thing should never exist. Such a thing we should fight to make illegal.
So I want to go on a tangent with that. Maybe we'll come back to it. We probably will because I do want to address what counts as social media and what doesn't, because in my opinion, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's social media. So, but before we do that, if you had finished your thought, then Charles, could you share with us your experiences with social media from when you began until just what it's like for you now? If you finish, Jeremy.
Yeah, go ahead, Charles. I'll save a point for later this video.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. So, um, I mean, I was around during the advent, if you will, of America Online, All right. And so a lot of people that are, approaching 40 or something like this probably remember when this like dropped, right? Like these CDs would get sent out, and all you did was plug it into your computer and then you download the software, and next thing you know, you're online. And of course, maybe I'm backdating a bit, but this was the precursor to what would become social media, right? So the internet, for me, I mean, it was like 7th grade, and I was with my best friend, and his dad was like a tech guy back in the 90s. So he had all this like cutting edge hardware and software. So here we were, 12, 13, what have you, online on America Online, chat rooms, searches for profiles, having a good time. I mean, but we're 12 and 13, and we would just be in chat rooms, and it was just strange and new and exciting. And so that sort of dominated a lot of my life. Just come home from school, right? First thing you did was just log on, dial up, right? 256K. And you would get the direct messages. So then if you had, friends that had the AOL account or whatever, hey, what's your IM name? Add me to your friends list, and then we could chat online, right? So here was the shift in my life from, coming home and getting on the phone with some friends to now I'm just online and chatting in our little text box or whatever, right? So, in many ways, I was sort of conditioned to participate and enjoy this type of technology, which eventually would become social media, right? I mean, as computers got more powerful and more minimal, you can compress the technology into smaller and smaller devices. Now we have full-blown, computers in our pockets, in addition to these apps that run the gamut, right? I mean, gaming communities to political bodies that you can engage with, to pornography, to I mean, you name it. Like, I like Jeremy's characterization here of Pandora's box, right? This in fact is the closest thing I could think of, right, to what that would be. Now, my current usage, again, sort of, I mean, I wouldn't say I enjoy it, but I use social media quite a bit, especially Instagram. And I think a lot of that has to do with, it's a bit more complicated, only because I have some middle school aged kids, and I want to understand what the world is like for them. And I'm a teacher, and so for me to truly communicate with these kids, I have to know sort of at least an awareness of what's happening, trends, pop culture, what have you. I need to have an awareness to be able to communicate with them. I would agree with Jeremy that there sort of is a double-edged sword here, you might say, or two sides of the coin, right? I mean, you could meet the love of your life on an app. I mean, that's possible, right? You could also get your life destroyed from your usage of the app. And now it's gotten so bad that, you have to be careful what you say on these apps. I mean, so the political question of freedom of speech is now, in front of us. But I guess I would just generally point out, I mean, some of my undergraduate work was in studying the different industrial revolutions. And so we've actually had 4. And the third one was sort of the advent of computers and automation and electronics. So I think scholars would say around 1969 or so was the sort of third wave of the Industrial Revolution, which then kind of becomes the internet around the late 80s or what have you. But I'd like to just point out that in my reading of industrial revolutions, right? Maybe I should just say quickly that the first one was steam power and weaving looms in 1784. And then the second was the mass production assembly line in 1870. And then in 1969, we had, again, automation, computers, and electronics. And now we're in the throes of the fourth industrial revolution, which is Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, algorithms, what have you. I'd like to just point out that for each industrial revolution, a type of dehumanization occurs. Somehow, some way, the human person is affected in an essential way or in an ontological way. We become less apt to produce with our hands. We become less able to work with our bodies. So there's a sort of disembodiment, right, that occurs throughout these waves or the revolutions. And at this point in time, I think the DSM, which is a manual of a health manual that talks about certain pathological problems and whatnot that we deal with, internet addiction is a real phenomena. It's a real problem. That speaks to the need for the quick dopamine hits. It speaks to the need for the desolation or the isolation, as it were, that we experience with using these technologies too much. So, long story short, I use it quite a bit, mostly for educational purposes for myself. However, I'm also very conscious of the possibility that human users of these technologies actually become the tools of the tools, right? So like technology, you said earlier, Memos, is a tool. It could be used as such. But what's happening now in the kind of unstoppable evolution of these technologies is that the humans are actually becoming the tools of the tools. We are becoming used. And that kind of gets into, what Jeremy's article is about. I thought it was very poignant, very clear. I'd like for at some point, Jeremy, just to chime in a bit more about that isolation that occurs. And then that kind of, he wouldn't call it, I don't think you called it dehumanization on your article, Jeremy, but I think you might agree with that, or at least empathize with the reading of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I would certainly agree that there's a dehumanization, at least the real threat of it, because just as I said, we have a societal problem of people making these things that are not morally formed, or at least are not adequately morally formed, just somewhat. And so you get all sorts of interesting results. I think one of the problems that we will see in the future is the invasion of advertising. We already have it in our faces everywhere we go, but now what you will get is like if you use the search bar in like Windows File Explorer, Microsoft has been examining advertising in that, or BMW's requiring a subscription for you to use heated seats. If they can do that with heated seats, why not with advertising? Pretty much, we're going to come to a point where if it connects to the internet, you will be advertised to, unless you pay more money to get out of it. And that just goes back to this dehumanization. It's we're going to barrage you until you either give up and give us money, or you click on this and give us money. And we're not going to stop hounding you until you die. And then when you die, we'll just pass on to the next person.
Yeah, so I'm more scared now than at the beginning of this podcast episode, hyperbolically speaking.
Yeah, sorry about that.
But
Well,
no, we have just a lot on our plate. It's
think about it
incredible.
this way. If Elon Musk is successful putting a chip inside your brain that can connect to the internet, you can get advertisements directly transmitted to your brain. Or you
That
think the Facebook glasses or whatever, where you'd be looking around, oh, Coca-Cola ad now. Gotta take off my glasses till the ends. You know that's coming.
But the whole chips in your brains, that I think is more fantastical. That's more sci-fi. Like, no, that I
Guillermo,
mm,
sci-fi begins with a thought and imagination of the writer. And then the scientist says, how can I do that? You watch sci-fi from the 60s, a lot of the technology they have, we already have it now. You think about handheld communication devices in Star Trek, well, we have that now. My phone is a more powerful computer than the spacecraft in the first original Star Trek movie.
real
If
quick.
you listen, I forget what it is, but they said the memory of this computer is so vast. And then they say it's in megabytes or whatever. They couldn't comprehend a computer with a terabyte. And we got now computers with multiple terabytes and more. Think about the data storage for the Google servers. It's ridiculous. You think about my phone, not only is it more powerful in that regard, but you got the instant messaging, you got the phone. I have a TI graphing calculator on my phone. What am I doing with a graphing calculator on my phone? You know, you have all these things that little phone can do. You can hold thousands of songs. You can hold movies. That
Yeah,
right there is sci-fi and reality.
yeah. And what's interesting about sci-fi, Jeremy, and I'm glad you brought it up, is that it's only a matter of time until science fiction becomes just like science and real. The very first purported text of sci-fi is Johannes Kepler. He wrote a book called Somnium back in like the 1600s, might even been the 1500s, about lunar travel. Right. So this was 500 years ago, and we got there. So there is something strange about what technology is, and I know we want to stick with social media, but I think that social media is sort of an accident, right, of technology itself.
Yeah.
And of course, we know that this question has been thought about most recently by like Heidegger or something. But there's one term I want to bring out. It's called cybernetics, and it's not really talked about too much. But the etymology of that, so let me just define cybernetics real quick. It's the field of study that's concerned with communication and control systems in living organisms and machines. So the relationship between humans and machines, or humans and computers, or humans and digital media or social media. Now that relationship is defined by cybernetics, but the etymology, I think you'll find very sort of disconcerting. So kyberneo, this is the Greek term, the prefix of cybernetics in Greek, means to govern. So kyberneo means to govern, and then that last part, the suffix is the its or itis, which is the agent. So we have cyberneotis, which is cybernetics, which literally means to govern agents. So it's a study of number one, what the relationship is between man and machine, or man and technology, but it's an examination of, we're at a point now where we're examining what is governing what. Is it man still governing the machine, or is it machine governing man? And so that kind of inquiry is very scary. We shouldn't be that scared, but we should at least have a healthy sort of paranoia of the possibilities moving forward in the future. And of course, Meta, ex-Facebook or whatever, is putting out the Oculus. It's already been out. The Facebook, I guess it's the Oculus, right? These complete VR worlds. We're trying to get into sort of like this completely virtual space. And ultimately, that's where we're going to consume our social media. All the advertising is going to hit us there. And the question is, if insofar as we're still wondering about the human person in relation to these technologies, how much more dehumanized or isolated or desolated can we get? And yeah, it's people need to be having these conversations and talking about these things and proposing solutions.
I propose, not to change the subject, but I propose that we dedicate one episode to artificial intelligence, just because there's so much to address there, and I have a lot of pushback. Um, I think from a philosophical standpoint about how, yeah, I'll share my take another time on artificial intelligence specifically. And no, just thank you for sharing just those thoughts as well. And just from what we've addressed so far, well, okay, social media, is it worth it? I think just Jeremy just hit the nail on the head. The Pandora's box is open. There's no going back. And if we do, it's because of there's no internet. Like we can't have the internet without social media. And can we go back to times without the internet? I fail to see how.
Oh, simple. You just be like the Amish. You form a community and go off grid. It's simple
But
as that.
culturally, bro,
Oh,
culturally,
culturally,
yes,
no,
man. No,
no.
well, no, and then just the last thing, and we should wrap up in a little
Yeah.
bit.
Before
But
we do wrap up, there
mm,
are a couple things I do want to say
oh,
at some
please,
point.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. I think just the first thing, like we've brought up many concerns about social media. I think the first thing we can do is educate ourselves as society about the dangers of social media and then demand more government action, regulation on social media. And I guess just to tie in on cybernetics and other related technological fields that we need to make sure as we have new technology that we are conforming that technology towards the dignity of the human person and not trying to conform the human person to technology. And then just a second thing, not all social media is created equally. I do want to give a warning to our listeners about TikTok because just talking about algorithms for a moment, the way that TikTok is designed at its algorithm core is to get you addicted. They are trying to addict you to watching their videos, which is why it's designed the way it is with the short videos and you have the scrolling through the videos. Facebook is similar in a lot of ways, but TikTok, the way they made their algorithm has made it devastatingly more addictive. And they are, I know it's a very political question concerning Trump trying to stop TikTok, and then you have the Democrats ridiculing Trump. But even today, there are now a lot of Democrats recognizing that TikTok is a danger. The thing to keep in mind is TikTok is owned by a Chinese company, and all of your user data goes to China, and they don't care about your privacy. What they're doing is using it as it's software to spy on you. And I know that sounds like conspiracy theorist, but it's really not that far-fetched. And it's probably the most conspiracy sounding I will be in the podcast because I do want to give that warning about this one in particular because of how they designed their algorithm to prey upon and make you addicted to them. That's their model. That's how they made the algorithm. And that's why it's so successful. Back to you, Guillermo.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for sharing that because that is one point that Charles made earlier that we want to see what kids are doing. Like what is life like for them? I know social media is inherently a part of that, but not Facebook, you know. And so what is TikTok? That yeah, it just sounds like what MySpace was in my day. TikTok is to the kids nowadays, and no, it's disturbing to hear these facts. So, and I would contemplate getting a TikTok, but I guess do I need one? Do we need to have accounts with these things and places just to see what it's like. I think at some level, yes, but maybe not. Maybe not. But um, well, that's a
Yeah.
Well,
huge danger.
yeah, and real quick, in some ways, Jeremiah, you're bringing up an important question, I think, just for some of our listeners and others that are interested in, like, classical education, and some of us are classical teachers and whatnot. So, I wonder about the future, I think it behooves a well-rounded classical educator to understand what's happening with the current state of affairs of the world, even though we commit ourselves to certain ancient things, medieval things, trivium, quadrivium type stuff. But, like, we still need to be able to at least have a grasp of the state of affairs of our kiddos and our children.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we need like full blown TikTok accounts and like posting every day or whatever, but have an awareness of what a hashtag is, or have an awareness of what are some of the current trends, even if they feel so like the decline of civilization, but we need to understand, right, what's going on.
What we need to do to build off of you, Charles, is we need to take the things that are good and true, what our classical education, our religion as Catholics, we need to take that and we need to be able to understand how to present that to the new generation and be able to dialogue with them. We need to be able to figure out just like what is the culture, what's the lay of the land, so that we can traverse it and effectively engage. And that's why we have the social media accounts we have. It's why we have the podcast. It's why we have the website. It's why we have the Facebook and whatnot. And so we can, in some respect, meet people on the battlefield and show them the way.
Yeah, we're no good just standing on the sidelines either, and just being in person exclusively and so forth. Well, no, and of course that's an excellent point. So we should wrap up. Couple of last things that I want to mention, and you each addressed it in a certain way. I would just call this a new culture of death. Not so much, yes, we're dying, but insofar as we're still alive, then we're not really dead. But well, even the concept of the culture of death presupposes we're alive, of course, but dead on the inside. Here's a new kind of dead, a dead insofar as smart devices are just so part of the culture. Those devices themselves, were they ever alive? But no, they are purely material things that lack uh, biological life. Insofar as our culture is so contingent on these devices, I do see this materialism as its own kind of culture of death. For our viewers and listeners who probably aren't familiar, culture of death, it's really the phrase that we use for a contraceptive culture. Whole different topic, but I'm sure
Well,
related nonetheless because of it's just the same culture that we're
you
in.
you've really hit the point, I think, of the video of this
Hmm.
podcast episode.
Mm.
We have another manifestation of the culture of death. It's just we Catholics have a duty to promote culture of life. And traditionally it's interpreted that we protect the human person against evils of euthanasia, contraception, abortion, divorce, etc. But what we have to recognize that it does include other things such as drug addiction, poor healthcare systems, and social media. Because, like as you said, it's like you're living dead. You're living death if you're addicted. In fact, that I forget where at in the church document, but in the church document, church drugs and drug addiction, drug addiction is described as like a living asphyxiation. You're just living out your strangulation, essentially dragging it out over time. And if you get addicted to social media, it's same sort of way. You get addicted and it consumes more and more of your life. And as it consumes more of your life, you're sacrificing your psychological well-being and potentially your physical well-being if you're just sitting on the couch staring at the screen.
Absolutely. It's another manifestation um, of the culture of death. So, of dying, I should say. It's another manifestation of dying in a culture of death. Now, just the last thing that I would like to leave ourselves and our listeners to contemplate is the difference between communication and communion. Social media, just in the end, it just, um, yeah, the end is communication, and this is just another means. But communion, that's something just very distinct. Something similar is going on in a different way, in the actual way that we are created to be. So that's that for this topic, and I do think it opened up a Pandora's box to some other topics, including AI, as I suggested earlier. But any other just final thoughts regarding this topic before we proceed with any announcements and prayer requests?
I don't have anything else to add.
Okay, just real quick, Jeremy, I want to
Yep.
emphasize something that you said previously, restricting, limiting our use of device. And I would encourage just keeping our kids away from smart devices altogether until late high school or even after high school.
Yeah, just something to keep in mind for the listeners is essentially the brain of the teenager doesn't really stop developing till like the mid 20s.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And even then, your brain, even once you're of old age, it's still constantly changing. But once you get through I guess, your younger years up through the mid 20s, you're not going to become as addicted, or the likelihood of becoming addicted is going to decrease the older
Okay.
you get.
Hmm.
So you think about something like alcohol use. If you don't consume alcohol until you're an adult, the odds of you becoming addicted is going to be much less than if you start as a teenager because of how the drug affects your brain chemistry.
That's a good analogy.
Similar results have been shown with other drugs as well. That's just brain chemistry right there.
Oh, thank you. Charles, any final thoughts?
I didn't want to spoil Jeremy's article, but there's this.
Uh,
There's just this one paragraph that just is hanging with me.
Okay, please.
Is that okay? May I read it just quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's with regard to the isolating principle of screens, of technology and social media, let's say, right? Screens are isolating devices. This is Jeremy. They promote a relationship between a user and a device. There is an anti-communitarian principle inherent to the design of the machine. We can no doubt game together online or watch a movie together, but in each communitarian situation, the experience is ultimately that between the individual user and the device used. In this respect, the persistent danger remains that when we use screens, we drift towards social isolation. We hence must be conscientious of this fact. The more we are not personally active with our center of being towards resisting this principle, then we too will follow the drift of the current toward isolation. We must have awareness and concern over this threat to our personhood and strive to actively work against this tendency of the screen. So I don't think I have any other thoughts about that. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I think it's very well put. It's clear. I do just want to highlight the language here, the center of being and the threat to our personhood. And as Catholics, we know that the center of our being is Christ and his word. And that's our anchor. And so in terms of sort of struggling with these technologies or whatever, social media, just to reiterate what was said earlier, we should use these technologies to reinforce, animate the dignity of the human person every time. And if not, then we run the risk of very, very evil things happening. So that's all I got.
Great. No, and I think you're right. Let's do it. And in light of that, well, we have a lot of work to do. A lot. We're not alone. All right, everyone. Yeah. Do we have any announcements? What a great topic, by the way. And yeah,
this was a fun video.
thank you. Absolutely. Any announcements, everyone, before we proceed with any prayer requests?
Charles, do you want to start?
Announcements. No announcements. I'd like to continue to ask those of us to keep my family in prayer. My wife is, we helped usher in our fourth daughter and fifth child. So just, from a management perspective and from a spiritual, health perspective, I'd ask for some prayers for the Masiati family. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I don't have any announcements either.
Okay. I have announcements.
Oh, please.
For our listeners. First, we will be starting a Theology of the Body video commentary that will be distributed through all of our podcast distribution platforms. This begins September 5th of this year. Our goal is one video per audience. So as a walkthrough of each audience of the Theology of the Body. So that's right. There will be over 130 videos. It's quite an enormous endeavor that Guillermo and I have been working on, but we're hoping it will produce a lot of fruit in your life as it has in Guillermo's and mine. So pay attention to that. The website will have some more information about the video series. And starting on September 5th, you can start finding those videos on our platforms where we distribute our podcasts. So Buzzsprout, YouTube, you name it, it will be there. And secondly, I will have a forthcoming book on the morality of marijuana. And this book is a revisement and a enlargement of the 5 articles on the website. There's a lot of new content and it's much more thorough. So that is something to keep an eye out for. We'll have more information for that in the future once we have a date for publication and whatnot.
Excellent. Yes, and it's been a huge blessing in our mission here at Nouvel Esprit to just bring the theology of the body, audience per audience, to our followers. So thank you for announcing that, Jeremy. Do you have any prayer requests?
Just for my family and our website.
Great.
For our mission.
Yes.
And all the work we are doing.
Mm-hmm. And I just have a special prayer intention. If you could please keep that intention in your prayers, I'd really appreciate it. But all right, thank you all for tuning in. And what I want to mention is please be sure to share our content, share this episode if you really liked it, and prayerfully consider supporting us on Patreon. With that having been said, thank you once more. We bid you adieu.
I do.
Bye.